Hey, Jimmy, what are you doing? I'm just getting ready. Yeah, I'm just hanging out with Token. Is he doing it again?
He's doing it again.
Dude, what are you doing after school, Token? You wanna hang out?
I have band practice.
God, you're so cool. All right, bro. I'll catch you at recess. Fist bump. Fist bump, bro.
Want to alter that. I'm just not going to have enough 3-0s before the cube is done. One thing I thought of 3-0ing it about is Evan.
I 3-0'd my cube about.
The one thing I thought of altering in relation to the 3-0 is that Evan was going on a rant about how apparently all that glitters is a thing from Shakespeare, except it's not a thing from Shakespeare.
As we all know, it's actually all that glisters.
Did you actually just know this?
No.
You were there for this?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Fine. I won't tell you then. I won't tell you anything. Anyway, it'd be kind of cool to make an all that glisters ornithopter. But that would be cool if Evan had 3-0'd with all that glitters, but they didn't. I 3-0'd.
Can you tattoo an ornithopter?
I also thought about...
Give the ornithopter a cool tattoo.
Not tattooing the ornithopter, but doing a transfer with the tattoo transfer stuff, which looks very specific. It's like kind of a glossy purple like thermal transfer. So like doing a transfer onto the card, that would like totally work. Like let it set for a couple days, it would like absolutely stick forever, and that would be very cool. Of what though?
It could be like, the classic mom heart arrow tattoo, but it also somehow integrates like, me mom's a compute.
There's a lot of threads coming together.
Yeah.
A lot of separate threads coming together. And those threads are coming together on this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Hi. My name is Andy, and I'm here as always with my co-host Anthony, token white man of Lucky Paper Radio Maddox.
Oh, right. Sure. That's not true. We got two of us. And
we got a lot of those. And also, you don't have token white men in most anything.
Yeah.
Talking about tokens, Anthony, this is maybe one of the most trite ideas for an episode, but the thing I've been thinking about the most with regards to my cubes lately has actually been token logistics.
Okay, you want to talk about not like the effects of gameplay of tokens and the kinds of themes and strategies. You just want to talk about the physical tokens.
I want to talk about the
impacts.
Two
separate topics.
I want to talk about the impacts of gameplay logistically.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's related, right? Like, I think a lot of cube designers, like, there is a little quiet bugbear, which is tokens. That kind of is a little bit of a nightmare for a lot of cube designers, which I think is for obvious reasons, but we'll just say, like, if you are designing a cube, you're pulling cards from Magic's full history in most cases. You want to combine cards from different sets, different planes, different whatever, and a lot of cool cards make tokens, and you end up with a cube that makes a lot of different types of tokens, and then managing them becomes a bit of a nightmare for a lot of reasons.
Increasingly so. I mean, I feel like we can actually do some math on this. This wouldn't be too hard, but like more and more cards make tokens, and more cards seem to make unique tokens, especially as we're pushing into like really distinct worlds. It's not as much that they can just say, oh yeah, white has 1/1 soldiers that get used a lot, and I'm sure we can go deep into that specific example, but also it's like, oh yeah, in this world we need Cylons, in this world we need puppies, in this world we need tribbles, and all of those things just add up. And I'm sure also that they've actually made all those creature types by now. I just haven't noticed them.
In my power-motivated Eternal Cube, the Bun Magic Cube, where I don't have a like strict complexity minimalization goal, I have 38 unique tokens, and that is even with me kind of already having weeded some cards out for having unique or confusing tokens, but 38 unique tokens in that cube. And I have found that in every other cube project I've worked on, I have made either a conscious or a subconscious effort to really limit token bloat, and found that it actually does have a pretty profound impact on the gameplay experience, which I do want to like draw this connection between logistics and gameplay, right? Like, yes, in a strict mechanical gameplay sense, like, does it matter if something makes a 1/1 human soldier versus a 1/1 soldier versus a 1/1 elemental? Most of the time, no. Like, I'm not designing cubes where those types would matter, and like the distinction is probably going to make any sense. But an important thing to learn for every game designer is that like the game design is the whole thing. Like the way you portray the cube, the way it's sleeved, the box that it's in, like the experience of drafting it, like that's all part of the game design. I have found that, for example, the main comparison I'll draw here is Sacred Geometry is kind of like very similar ethos to my Bun Magic Cube, except as I've said before in this show, it is pared down to be mechanically simple wherever possible, with the goals of, number one, just allowing every player an easier access to my sort of gameplay goals. Like, I like people to be able to play low curving, high interaction Magic, and I don't think that has to come at a bar of like being really invested in the game or whatever. It also has all these side effects of like cutting down on draft time. Like, draft and matches just go much faster in that cube than other cubes, which is huge. It's much simpler to like clean up than other cubes with a lot of tokens to sort of manage. There's a lot of like other knock-on effects that tons of people have made the comment with Sacred Geometry when they learned that in that cube I have limited every color to just one token, a single specific token. A lot of people remark after playing one draft, like, actually, this is really nice. I don't have to like look through all this big stack of like insane tokens to find the one that I'm looking for. And then when I do find it, I wanted two, but actually it was only one, or I, made a copy of one of my tokens and now I need a third one, but you've only got two. And instead I just have like 20 soldiers, 20 goblins, 22 two drakes, 20 zombies.
55 burgers, 55 fries, 55 tacos, 55 pies.
Or I'm not sure if that's the actual number, but I have enough of all these tokens that it's just you grab a token of the appropriate sleeve and you put it on the battlefield and it's 100% correct. The rules text is correct. You don't have to worry about whether you grabbed the wrong goblin because you wanted the goblin shaman instead of whatever. It actually does make a pretty profound difference on people's play experience.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of worth separating out. There's a difference between the kinds of strategic decisions people are making because what cards are in the cube and their overall play experience. And those two are different, but they absolutely affect each other. And at the end of the day, our hope with a cube is to give people a positive gameplay experience. And so those things do really matter.
I don't actually even know, Anthony. I have a lot of thoughts about how I approach tokens in each of my different cubes, and I want to talk about them in detail. But what is your approach to tokens? How do you think about them when you're designing a cube?
I will say, just aesthetically, I love tokens. I just love cards that make tokens. I mean, aesthetically in a gameplay sense. it's a kind of thing that I love to do, and I find it very satisfying. And here's a card that makes a bunch of, people know I love squirrels and sapperlings, and something that's just going to make a bunch of little guys for me is gameplay that I find pretty satisfying. It does lead to my cubes also having a ton of unique tokens. My regular cube has, I think it's over 30 unique tokens. My strategy is usually to try to get, the actual printed tokens that Wizards creates, because I think they are just the most clear gameplay pieces. In the regular cube, the cube that we play most often of mine, I have them sleeved based on the color of the card that makes them, which I don't know how much I like this idea. There's pros and cons. So all the tokens that are made by a red card have a red sleeve. All the tokens that are made by a green card have a green sleeve, and so forth.
And that means if you have a treasure token that's made by cards in 3 colors, you have one in each color.
Right. And my hope there is twofold. One, if you're just in this cube, most people are drafting a 2-color and a splash deck usually. So hopefully it'll be pretty easy. Here's the stack of planes, and all the cards that I need for the white cards in my deck will be right next to them, and it'll be pretty obvious. So I hope it's easier from that sense. I also hope it is easier from the situation that you described of somebody already took 3 of the goblins, so I don't have enough now. That if you're grabbing, the treasure token that is for your treasure producing card, the one that is going to be for somebody that has a different treasure producer, and there's actually no treasures as we talked about in the regular cube, but that's just an example.
Clues is what you have a lot of.
That you'll be able to find it consistently and not just have somebody else have already taken all of the relevant tokens. I also do pay attention a little bit to the counts. If you have something that makes 2 servos, it's okay, there's a single card that makes 2 servos, have 2 servo tokens. Sure, there's going to be some edge cases where there'll be more, but that's generally going to be enough. And then think about things that are less deterministic, like a squirrel nest. How many do you expect to have in the game? You need at least 2 so you can represent tapped and untapped squirrels at the same time, and maybe you can use dice to represent them, but I'll often include a couple extra for that as well. I think I like that approach overall, having first of all, the token sleeved, either by the color of the token makes it a little bit easier, but importantly sleeved in something that's distinct from the rest of the cube cards, and having them sorted.
So your white tokens are not.
They are technically
perennial annoyance.
They are different sleeves, but when I re-sleeve the cube, I switch the color. That will be fixed next time I re-sleeve the cube because it's going to be in some other color.
Yeah.
I think. I forget what color I ordered. It'll be fine. I think for my other cubes, I'm a little bit less careful, and I just have all the tokens sleeved up in a particular different color.
Yeah. I want to just first start with a full list of all of the logistical challenges that tokens represent. We've covered one, which is just that if you are not paying specific attention to it, you are likely to have included a lot of cards in your cube that make a lot of different tokens. The sheer number is annoying. That is one logistical challenge. Another logistical challenge of tokens is that even if you provide the correct tokens, players will often not use them. Especially if your cube makes a lot of tokens, you'll find players just put a dice on the table and say, that's my treasure token. And I always say, stop, don't. When I do it, when I'm a player, I'm always just like, oh, help me. I'm a dumb guy. Like, I need the help. I can't keep track of these things. I always make it self-effacing.
Which is reasonable. Like, even if, yes, you are smart enough to do it, it's still adding an extra task that you have to focus on. It's another plate to be spinning. And so it does take away from your ability to keep track of stuff. So I think it is a totally reasonable request to ask of your opponent.
And if you're listening to this thinking like, oh, I don't need that, that's like, thing that you should only need if you're like not paying close enough attention to the game or whatever. First of all, you're wrong.
I'm glad you're so smart. You don't need this episode.
You're just wrong. Like if you are capable of doing it 95% of the time or whatever, 5% of the time you will mess up or something. My bigger issue is that like if you are assuming that that's not necessary, there's a lot of players, especially newer players, that will not advocate for you having corrected the board state or like made something clear, and that will just not realize that you in fact had a treasure token there because they'd feel bad asking, right? I think about a new player is like not just coming to your cube group for the first time, but like they're in a whole new social experience, right? Like
that's a really good point.
Maybe they're like, oh, the norms here that everyone represents treasures with a dice. I guess that's what I'm supposed to do, and I'll like try and keep track of it or whatever. On top of all the other new stuff they're trying to sort of parse on a cube night, I'm a huge believer in like it's so important to like the ease of everyone's play experience that you like essentially always have the correct tokens in play. I also, even in my own cubes, really try to avoid ever using dice to indicate numbers of things because dice are also the indicators of counters, and I even pack in my counters bag specific dice that are 1/1 counters and specific dice that say X and a number, which are like I use sometimes for multiples. I'm a real stickler for like a clear board state because Magic is a complicated game, and I don't want to make it any more complicated by introducing additional ambiguity in like how things are represented. That's the second logistical problem with tokens to me, is that even if you provide them, even if you've accounted for the fact that your cube makes, in my case, 38 unique tokens, sometimes players just won't use them, which brings us to like the third related logistical challenge, which is just distributing them, right? Like a lot of times they won't use them because they won't realize they need them until they're in the middle of a game and they go, oh, I play my thing, make a token, I'll get it later. For now, this upside down sideboard card is my token or whatever.
Which we should come back to because I've been getting lazy and doing more of that, if I'm honest.
I still avoid it whenever possible, but I'm not to say I've never done it. It has certainly happened before. I will never do it if there's two different tokens of mine in play. As soon as that happens, I'm never using a sideboard card face down. I will sometimes, cheat a little bit if there's only one thing on either side of the battlefield that makes any tokens. It's on my side, and I can like put the tokens right under the young pyromancer or whatever, like a quarter under the card, and be like, here you go, this is the thing this thing is making. But even then, I try to avoid it. Distributing them is really complicated. I'll come back to all the different ways I've tried to solve this problem when I get done with my list of things that are logistical problems with tokens. But just to say that, like, I don't think there is a clear, great answer for how to like make it easy to distribute the tokens to your players. The next logistical thing about tokens is completely separate from playing cube. Sorting and organizing a collection of them sucks. It sucks hard because Wizards of the Coast, for reasonable reasons, prints a lot of tokens double-sided, which means that many Magic cards you can sort by their color or their, whatever. You can make a sort of reasonable sorting of them. Here are my white cards, my blue cards, my creatures, my non-creatures. You can basically never do that with tokens because so many tokens have another token on the backside, which also introduces an additional logistical challenge of if you put that token in your cube and it is not sleeved, then people might not know which side they're supposed to care about. And if you're looking through a token pile, you have to look through it on both sides, which is super duper duper freaking annoying.
Yeah, I think people are going to think this is a pretty unreasonable gripe, but I think it is a pretty major issue. I think especially if you have unsleeved tokens, and let's say you put in the one Phyrexian germ that's important in there, but it has a 3/3 elephant on the back, and the person who has Call the Herd just grabs that 3/3 elephant, and now you no longer have the token you need. And that's like, a double-sided token seems like such an obvious idea. Like, here's this piece of cardboard, half of it's wasted, look, we get twice the buffalo from it, and yet they just like end up being really frustrating. And I think also as somebody that like publishes stuff about Magic on the internet, the double-sided tokens, sometimes you'll be like, oh, I want to have a card hover for a Saproling here, and the most recent Saproling token actually technically on the front face, as far as Scryfall has logged it, has a dinosaur on it, and you hover over it and it's a dinosaur, and like all the little things about double-sided tokens end up being very frustrating. And sleeves, fortunately, as far as like when you actually have your tokens pulled together, fix that issue. But for managing a collection of them, it is annoying. And trying to order them. Well,
so first of all, just to say it, I'm not saying Wizards of the Coast has like made a huge mistake by printing double-sided tokens. I think for their motivations, it probably makes a ton of sense, and I'm not even criticizing them at all. I'm saying, as us, this little tiny niche playing the game in like a very specific way, that decision, which might make a lot of sense, coincidentally, is kind of a nightmare. And it is also, like you pointed out, a nightmare for finding them on, card sites to buy and purchase. You say that like sleeving them solves that problem, most people don't have 5 different colors of sleeves plus the 6 their cube is sleeved in. Like, that's a logistical problem in and of itself, to like not have them sleeved in the same color of a thing you already have. Well, and you're going to buy a pack of 100 sleeves so you can sleeve your 12 red tokens in like red sleeves. Like, that's a logistical challenge too, that like introduces more cost to like getting your cube together and more hassle to like make it feel like too much of a barrier. Is that a fairly comprehensive list of the logistical challenges of tokens?
Sure. I mean, as long as we're talking about using official printed tokens, yes, but there's lots of other logistical angles we could look at from using non-standard methods of representing tokens.
Yeah, I mean, that's also fine. Like, I would say sourcing a non-standard, fan-made token is about as hard as sourcing the official one because you need to like find an artist you like and like find their Etsy store or whatever. Like, you can do that, and I will say that if you are a fan of like supporting fan artists, like not official Wizards of the Coast artists, but like people that play the game that also make their own art, there's a wide world of token artists out there, because that's one of the things you can make that has clear gameplay use that is not infringing on any of Wizards of the Coast copyright in any way. So if you do want to buy spirit tokens made by a fan artist, that's great, and I encourage people to do that. All these things I think are big barriers, and as I sit here today, 10 years into my cube journey, I would say that my impression of how much of a problem it is has only increased over time, right? Like when I first started my cube, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get the tokens, that's like the thing, whatever, no big deal. This is tangential. I do want to go on a little bit of a rant at dry erase tokens right now.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people might be saying, oh, just get Infinite tokens or whatever. And no slight on the product. I know that the Infinite tokens person is like a, good community member or whatever. I think for the purposes of Cube, the dry erase tokens suck.
I agree.
I think logistically they're awful. You end up with like dry erase marker dust all over you. The dry erase marker gets left on the token for, a week because people forget to wipe it off, and then it's got like a shadow that's always on there forever. You got to have a fresh dry erase marker, which is one of the hardest markers that seems to keep fresh. They seem to dry out like no other marker in no time. And then you're also taking the time every time you make a token to like make a little drawing, which is cute and all, but is, I think, hugely annoying. I think if you're drawn to that, I would highly suggest buying a bunch of just trading card size blanks, which you can buy on like Etsy's, where I've done it before. Maybe you can get it from other paper supply places, but
or just get some like cardstock and fold and crease and tear it.
Yeah, if you're willing to do the work yourself, you can chop it up yourself too. But get like card size blanks and just put Sharpies out, and then have people make tokens, but they're not dry erase, so they can't get smudged off, and then you can just put them in the box afterwards. And now you're accumulating a collection of fan made tokens. We did that for a long time when we were streaming and recording, Magic gameplay for YouTube, and I still have a big stack of all the tokens we made, and they're fun.
Yeah.
So do that if that's what you like. If you want to be making tokens ad hoc. I really personally do not vibe with the infinite tokens, and whenever I sit down and that's the token solution for a cube that I'm playing, I am mildly frustrated.
I totally agree, and it's disappointing because when this product first came around, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, like this is such a great idea, and then it just didn't take long for me to have the same realization of just like, this is just messy, and if I'm like making the tokens I need as I go and then putting them in a stack, they immediately just get wiped off, so it's like, it's not actually useful, it doesn't save me time in the next game, and I think that solution of, if you do like that, just using actual pieces of paper that people are using Sharpies on is so much better, because then throughout the course of the night, people are actually building up, oh, here's my token set, and it's going to save me time when I, draw my Young Pyromancer in round 2.
As opposed to what I see Infinite tokens being used for 95% of the time, which is they haven't even bothered to mark it at all. So it's just effectively exactly the same as an upside down sideboard card. They've just put it into play and said, sure, that's that. I'm not going to bother drawing it. You know what it is. And then you're the exact same problem as like someone putting a lemon on the table and being like, that's my sapperling.
Okay, but we should talk about that too, because I like that idea.
Maybe I'll think of something else, but I think that's my sort of full list of gripes with the logistics of tokens. I mentioned that I think it matters more now than ever before. My impression of how much it matters is at its highest, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, like you alluded to, the token bloat problem is only getting worse. So as every year passes, there's just more and more tokens you could potentially have accidentally included in your cube. That list gets longer. And I do think pound for pound, it's undeniable that cards just make more tokens now than before. I mean, I'll talk about my other cubes. My Neoclassical cube, I don't have a explicit token strategy. I don't try to mitigate them at all, but just naturally, there are so many fewer. If you go back to, things in the old border frame, so many fewer cards made tokens. I mean, tokens existed since Alpha. Like Thalid was printed in Alpha and required...
I don't think Thalid was, but the Hive was from Alpha.
That was in the Dark first? Antiquity?
Not Antiquities.
I thought that was in Alpha. Are you sure?
Nope.
I thought the whole thing was that, there was a realization when people realized that Thalid beats Savannah Lions,
Fallen Empires. Okay,
Fallen
I was gonna
Empires.
get there eventually.
The same one as Night Soil. Look, there were tokens in the earliest Magic sets, but I think it was a thing that was used kind of pretty sparingly for a long time, and then nowadays it is like just the norm that, there's going to be tons of cards that make a lot of tokens, especially for cards designed for supplemental products or, things like Modern Horizons where there's like no restriction about like reasonableness for retail limited. Like they still kind of constrain themselves to a limited set of tokens for each retail limited set, but those things go right out the window when it comes to, Commander products or Modern Horizons products or Universes Beyond products.
And also the types and things that tokens do have really evolved and gotten more complex. Initially it was just creatures, but now we have multiple types of like trinkety artifact tokens. There's the role tokens, like the different enchantment auras,
emblems, and outside the game trackers and stuff, which I think
like
definitely
poison
counts.
counters and
The Undercity.
all the dungeons, the stuff that I don't even want to talk about really, but yeah, like those get crazy.
That in combination with the fact that the way we play Cube, as most listeners will probably know, but if you're a new listener, in case you don't, we play in paper with our local play group. We don't play digitally, we don't play online, and so we have a local play group that we strive to make as friendly to newcomers as possible, and I think we do a pretty darn good job, all things considered. This is something that I just more and more feel like, again, it's kind of like, you didn't know how bad it was until you had it good, where like with Sacred Geometry and like seeing how much that like eases adoption of tokens. People just actually play with the tokens instead of putting upside down cards and play because it's so easy. It's so easy to find your tokens, so easy to put them back in the box in the right place. There's never any danger of someone having taken all your tokens from you because there's so many, and they're all identical in each color. Having played with that a couple times, I then look at my other cubes and go like, God, this is something I really want to solve here because it does really introduce this speed bump to the play experience that I think is not negligible in terms of how people's impression of the whole night goes.
It's an interesting point too about how it just like makes gameplay take a lot longer, and I think that there are actually multiple different sources of time that it takes up. Like there's the extra time if people are in advance flipping through the tokens to try to find the things they need at the beginning of the match. That's more time. It also just makes board states a little bit more complex, especially if you're using upside down sideboard cards. Just like the decision making process and like keeping track of everything is going to take longer. Are there other points you can think of that things just get stretched out more?
I mean, I think if you're a cube that makes a ton of tokens, you're also just prone to board stalls. Like you're making a lot of game objects.
Sure, yeah.
A lot of tokens are inherently chump blockers, and so if you have a lot of tokens, but to be clear, like I could still have a ton of tokens in Sacred Geometry if I wanted to, if they were all just the same kind, and so I could still suffer from that problem, even though I've solved some of the logistical problems in Sacred Geometry. All right, my cubes now. Sacred Geometry, I think, has a essentially perfect treatment of tokens. I've already alluded to it. There's one token in each color.
So lots of cards can make goblins. I'm assuming it's goblins. It's got to be goblins, right?
1/1 goblins, 1/1 soldiers, not human soldiers, if memory serves. 2/2 blue drakes, 2/2 black zombies, and the green token is actually switching to 4/4 beasts soon. I've tried a couple green tokens. The problems with Sacred Geometry with regards to tokens are entirely from a cube designer perspective, which is just that it is often hard for me to restrict myself because I really want to include Young Pyromancer in that cube, but I just can't because there are so many more cards that make 1/1 goblins that I consider to be, clean and sacred than 1/1 red elementals. And so
one day they'll print Young Goblin Master.
So that's the sort of concession I'm making there is I'm not playing Young Pyromancer. I'm not playing anything that makes 1/1 spirit tokens, despite there being a lot of clean 1/1 spirit token making cards because human soldiers is the thing. I will say my superficial complaints about my tokens in Sacred Geometry, there's only one, which is that I kind of wish that the human soldiers and the goblins weren't exactly the same mechanically because there's basically nothing in that cube that cares about creature color or type line. And so if you're playing a red-white deck, your deck might make both tokens, and then they kind of are fungible, even though they're not, because they're making different things.
Do you have cards that care about creature types that make that relevant at all?
Like a smattering. Like I have Metallic Mimic, I think, for example, which I actually have thought about cutting because of issues like this exactly. And some people have said like, oh, just cut Metallic Mimic, then you don't have to worry about this. But the thing is, I wouldn't want people to treat them fungibly. Even though it doesn't matter, I wouldn't want you to have to like wonder when your opponent grabs a goblin token for their resolute reinforcements, oh, do I have to ask them to get the soldier token because there's something in my deck that matters? I don't want you to have to do that, like to ask that question or to ask me that question or to trust me. I just want the sort of board state to be 100% clear. Something that I really like about the other tokens, 2/2 zombies, 2/2 flying drakes, and 4/4 green beasts is that they're all different sizes. And I like that green has the biggest tokens now, or maybe will by the time this episode comes out. It's a change I'm planning on making. I've got the cards on a stack. I haven't actually made the change yet. So that's my one and only complaint, is that it'd be cool if, the human soldiers were 1/2s, or obviously all the cards would have to change, because it would be a big mechanical change to the power level. But like, it would be cool if aesthetically the tokens were a little different. And I've considered switching to spirits for that reason alone, because then I have 1/1 flyers, 1/1 on the ground, 2/2 flyers, 2/2 on the ground, 4/4s. But the card support isn't exactly there. There's like really only 2 cards that make spirits that I really love mechanically.
Clarion Spirit and
I do love Lingering Souls.
Lingering Souls.
It's objectively, I think, a very clean, cool card. But I think that is near a perfect token solution. They are in the box. They are sleeved in their color. There is no instance of a color making a token of a different color. There are some gold cards that make tokens of a single color. Frontline Rush is a red-white card that makes red goblins. But there's no white cards that make blue tokens or whatever. If you're playing blue or blue-white, you can look and just figure out, do I need any of these tokens or not?
And you don't have anything that makes colorless or multicolored tokens either?
Correct. Nothing. That has worked out great. That, to me, is like basically the gold standard. I want a token experience that is basically that smooth for all of my cubes in an ideal world.
So the obvious question for cube designers who like the sound of that is, like, how much of a constraint on your cube design did that feel?
Differing amounts of constraint. It has been frustrating in some specific cases where, like, it's a card I really love, but just can't include, like, Young Pyromancer. Like, that's a bit of a bummer. If I just happened to make goblins, it would be perfect. And that's just, a factor of when the card was printed in flavor and plain and world building that it doesn't do that, because mechanically it'd be exactly the same for my purposes. Sometimes it is frustrating when you come across cards that make very slightly different, superficially different tokens. The human soldier and soldier example is the most obvious one.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know why, like, the history of the classic token types, like sapperlings and goblins, like, so many of them were very clear and consistent for much of Magic's history. I feel like the white creature tokens have just oscillated a lot, where it's like there are so many 1/1, no keyword white tokens that are just different for aesthetic reasons.
In that particular case, I will say that I found that the vast majority of cards I was interested in running made soldiers, not human soldiers.
Just humans, and not
just humans.
Ground spirits.
And not citizens, or that's a different one. So that could be a little bit annoying. But I think those, like, constraints also felt like, we say constraints breed creativity a lot. They felt that way too. Like, I was so excited when I locked in on 1/1 human soldiers. And one of the reasons I haven't switched to spirits is that specifically the suite of red-white cards that can support 1/1 human soldiers is, like, so perfect, basically. Like, the fact that Baird makes the same token that is made by Resolute Reinforcements, makes the same token is made by Attended Knight and Ancestral Blade and Hero Bladehold and Heroic Reinforcements and Martial Coup and Raise the Alarm. Like, all of these sort of cards all make the exact same token. And I think that provides, like, a visible connective tissue to tell you, like, this is kind of a deck. And it is. Those cards all go together and they all make the same token. And it kind of approaches that, like, abstract, superficial, kind of meaningless perfection. That is what I am seeking with Sacred Geometry. For everything just to feel right. Like, it feels like these cards were designed and put in the same set. And in some cases they were, but for the most part, I'm pulling them from all different parts of Magic's history, but they feel completely cohesive with each other because they share that exact same token. And so, even though it's a restraint, it also, like, when I decided on that token, I searched for every card that made that token on Scryfall and looked at all of them and was like, oh, a couple of these cards actually also fit. And so in that sense, it also inspired some of the direction of the cube design by being sort of limited to that token. The other place that constraint has been a really big deal is in green. You mentioned that you feel like white has been all over the place with token types. I think they've had some superficial annoyances, like occasionally caring about humans as a subtype and occasionally not wanting soldiers in a plane because soldiers don't fit thematically. Green is the place where I have the most ennui about the set of tokens, because I will suggest, and I'm ready for you to come to the defense of Sapperlings, that there's not really an iconic green token the same way there are in other colors. Sapperlings are, like, so specific to mechanics, they're not, like, genericized. There aren't a lot of cards that just make Sapperlings. A lot of them have to do with these stupid counters, and I don't want to have extra counters that aren't 1/1 counters.
You don't love spore counters?
Spore counters are fine. It's just, like, it's so heavily mechanically tied in,
right,
that it's not just like a soldier or a zombie or a goblin. Now, there are cards that just make a Sapperling, but for the most part, like, they don't have that sort of resonant sing that these other cards have to me. And also,
that hurts to hear.
I'm sorry to say it.
My beautiful Sapperling boys.
And then if you look at, like, the other tokens, like Call of the Herd is the card I most want to put in Sacred Geometry. I consider Flashback to be, like, completely iconic, and it's all throughout that cube. I think Call of the Herd is, like, the perfect green mid-range card. It's so mechanically simple, but the simplicity belies, like, a lot of power. We've talked about how Call of the Herd is actually surprisingly powerful for a lot of people. there's like 4 other cards in all of Magic that make a 3/3 elephant. Now, there are tons of cards that make 3/3 beasts, that make 3/3 dinosaurs, that make 3/3 whatevers. There's some 3/3 wolves, but the idea of like other ones making 3/3 elephants, there's just like not that many cards. And I think 2 of them are like referential callbacks to Call of the Herd, which also doesn't feel good to me because I'm playing the iconic thing. I don't want the like on the nose reference to it. So green is the one where I've struggled the most and where I've really felt this limitation. And I've actually tried, I think, 4 different token types in Sacred Geometry in green, if you count the beast, which I'm about to add and try. I tried elephants. I tried 2/2 wolves. I tried 1/1 elf warriors, and I'm now about to try 4/4 beasts. And I'm not convinced any of those are perfect. So that's where that restriction has become a problem. It has like prevented me from hitting that sweet spot of like, this is just, a cohesive, clear identity to this color's tokens. I don't have that in green yet.
Green is the color that's most about creatures, so it makes sense to me that like it's not as focused on a specific type of token because its idea is like we make all kinds of different creatures, and we're going to make big creatures and small creatures and medium creatures and creatures with like weird lopsided stats. I think that you're very strict on your restriction here in this cube. I think for other people that want to take away from that and get some of that benefit, I think you could also be a little bit softer on it and say like, okay, well, green has by its nature this diversity of tokens, so we'll break the rule and be like, let's have 3 or 4.
That has been suggested, and I think it's a completely reasonable suggestion. I do want to acknowledge my like strictness to my restriction, and part of the reason I have that freedom is that like I have other cubes. So this is my cube where I can like, this is the point. The point is to be very clear, so it's easier for me to embrace that restriction here than if I just had one cube. Then I'd really be like tempted to break a rule or two. And we've also advocated so many times on this show for not holding yourself to hard restrictions because they actually end up being fiercely limiting. In this case, I will say that I haven't tried it, but I suspect that a lot of my positive experience with this is specifically because of my intense commitment to the restriction, and that if I had 2 or 3 green tokens, then how many people are going to not know if all the white tokens are all soldiers or if there's actually 2 to 3 different white tokens, and they have to like check through all their cards to see if they make other types of tokens, and how much like a lot of that clarity and like, just immediate cleanness just goes away as soon as you're like breaking the rule a little bit, or if it would just work and be fine. I actually don't know, but
but what if you had 2 tokens in green and you had double-sided tokens with those 2? That's maybe the one case where the double-sided would actually be positive.
Actually, in the early days of this cube, I did have 2 tokens in each color. I had spirits and soldiers and goblins and something. I forget what some of the other 2 ones were. And I did have a couple drafts where I double sleeve tokens in clear sleeves and even like specifically sought out clear front and back, non-perfect hard, non-inner sleeves because they're actually not easy to find those because they're not very popular. Why would you want a perfectly clear back? Everyone wants the like shuffleable, like texture. That had the problem of you just can't tell from looking at the box of which tokens are which. I even looked for outer sleeves. There are some outer sleeves that have a border on them.
I was going to go there next.
I considered going there, and ultimately it was like, this is not enough juice for the squeeze or whatever, and I just decided to cut down to 1 token, and since then, it has been so freeing. Like, it took me a while to like really hold myself to that restriction, but since I've gotten there, it's felt really good.
Okay, wait. Easy option. If you have 2 sizes of creatures, let's say you have 1/1s and you have 4/4s, make the 1/1 tokens just really small. Just a little, like half a split card.
All the 4/4 tokens are folded in half and stuck in the box, and you just have to unfold them.
Just a big. It's very, very simple to recognize.
I really feel like that cube is essentially token perfection, save for my tiny quibble about the white and red tokens having the same mechanical functionality. Logistically, I think it's perfect, and like I said, it has informed the cube design in ways that I think has made the cube a more cohesive design and made, decks sing more clearly and like signals in draft be more clear in ways I wasn't even thinking about, but just like the commitment to that bit has really helped.
Yeah, I did the same thing and started out not in this place in my battle box, but at some point I was like, this is designed for quick, easy gameplay. Having a bunch of extra tokens is just totally counter to the idea here. So I trimmed down to 3, and similar to what you're saying about making them distinct, what did I go with? Saprolings, 2/2 zombies, and 1/1 flying. What do you call them? Ornithopters. Regular thopters.
Yeah.
That just makes it so much easier, and it's like a nice balance where, hey, there's still like having cards that can create 2 game objects really can impact the texture of games and open up some flexibility, but still just made it so much easier to be like, yeah, here's your stack of lands, and you get like these 6 tokens, and now you're good to go.
Yeah, I guess that's the last thing to mention on Sacred Geometry, maybe with regards to how that restriction has informed my cube design. I did find in early versions of the cube that like mid-rangey proactive decks kind of struggled because the control decks get to do all the powerful stuff. I've got Wrath of God, I've got, Swords to Plowshares, I've got Counterspell, they get all their best stuff, but specifically like big mid-range threats when you take away their ability to like make a bunch of tokens and also take away the complexity that I'm trying to run relatively simple cards there mechanically, not having an ETB and a leave the battlefield ability and a when you target something ability. When you take away all of that, you end up with just kind of like beef that dies to removal, which meant that those decks were kind of suffering. And I just solved that in different ways. Like I play cards in that cube some people would maybe consider like, Punisher cards or hate cards against control that I think just kind of fill that space the same way. I'm talking about stuff like Heartwood Storyteller is my favorite card in this space. Whenever any player casts a non-creature spell, their opponents draw a card. So great in a creature deck. You just play it and then your opponent's like, okay, I guess I can't cast cantrips or removal unless I want to remove that thing first. I mean, you still get to draw a card off of it. I play Sylvan Safekeeper in this cube right now, which, arguably people think is like not really appropriate, but I think that being able to protect your stuff from targeted removal is really good. I also play Dungrove Elder, like a card people might be surprised to hear me playing and excitedly playing because it has hexproof, but hexproof is much cleaner to me in terms of like the elegance of like how to beat control than like I'm going to beat control by making a bunch of game pieces and doing this and having that and having ETBs. It's like, nope, I'm anything you can't remove it. And like that's very clean. That's like a obvious like level 1 answer to how to like beat the deck with a bunch of removal spells. So those cards have kind of filled up that space, and I find that right now it's pretty well in balance despite again constraining myself to only a few number of tokens.
Is it worth mentioning the next level of extreme of a token solution is just don't have any cards in your cube that make tokens at all?
I don't know much worth talking about that. I mean, you could definitely do it. It doesn't actually limit complexity as much as you're imagining. You can look at cubes like the Penrose Cube for an example of like how you can still have really synergistic, rich, complex gameplay without any tokens. Obviously, if you don't have any tokens, you don't have any logistical problems about it. So I think this episode is basically not for you if you're cubing that way, and I respect it. I next want to talk about the Bun Magic Cube, which has had the longest history and like different approaches to token making, because this is taking longer than I expected. I was like, well, we get a whole episode out of tokens, and now I'm all of a sudden worried we're not going to get anywhere near all the token stuff in just in one episode. The Bun Magic Cube I've had for almost 10 years now. This is my cube that, as I mentioned earlier, currently creates 38 unique tokens, and a lot of them are made by multiple cards. So there's more than 38 cards in the cube that make tokens. And
there are also some cards that make multiple different tokens.
There are, but those are outnumbered by tokens that are made by multiple cards. My first solution to these tokens was I think I just sleeved them with the cube in like a different colored sleeve. And that's how I had them for a long time. And that was fine, but I had the problem that I've alluded to of a lot of people not bothering to like pick through the stack to pick out their token. My next solution to this was to try and alleviate that by sleeving them in unique colored sleeves by the color of the token, I think is what I went for, whereas you go for the color of the card that makes them. And I think at the time I wasn't like providing, a specific token per card necessarily. I was like, oh, I need a treasure token or whatever. And I wasn't looking to see like, oh, if I have 3 cards that make treasures, I have to include at least 3 treasure tokens. I was just including like I looked at the list of tokens my cube made and I included, some of each of them, but I was not sleeving them in the color of the card that made them, just in the color of the token themselves, which was fine. It certainly
is logical. If somebody's looking for a specific token, that's a reasonable way to make it easier to find it.
It certainly helped with adoption, but I would say it was still not anywhere near what I would want. And at some point, too, at this cube, I know I had over 50 tokens, and I had cut down on them.
Wow.
And I'm sure if you're listening to this and you just are, a Power Max gamer, you probably, I have no doubt you are on like the 30, 40, 50 tokens in your cube number. Like that's pretty typical, I think, these days for a cube that is just playing powerful, appealing cards. My next solution was much more thought through, and I alluded to this recently on an episode, and I didn't know at the time who to credit, whether it was Jake or I with this idea, and Jake came through with the receipts and pointed out that we were talking about this kind of simultaneously, but it was originally Jake's suggestion of getting little tiny envelopes to hold the tokens. What I contributed shortly after was sourcing the specific glassine envelopes that then Jake and I and a couple other cube designers have used to put our tokens in.
One of your secret skills, researching a very specific product.
I'm so good at researching things. And this was an attempt to solve a couple of problems. It was an attempt to solve the problem of having no clear way to categorize the token that is made by multiple colors of cards, because it was like, okay, where do I put the treasure token? It's made by 3 different colors of cards. Do I have 3 of them? Do I do whatever?
I feel like you got to have 3 of them, right?
Yeah, I guess. Or if it's made by a gold card, you put it in a gold sleeve. I felt like the sort of color of the card that made the token was not a perfect solution either. I wanted to solve that problem. I also wanted to further address the distribution problem because, again, I was finding that people were not getting all the tokens they needed. And I also found a couple times I observed that people tried to. They weren't I'm not going to get my tokens. They went through the token stack, got everything they thought they needed, but then got into games and realized, oh, actually, I forgot this makes a token and I forgot to get that one.
Very common.
Pretty common thing. So yeah, I really wanted to solve the distribution problem and the not knowing exactly how to sort tokens problem. And the idea that Jake and I had that we eventually executed on was printing out little copies of the card art just on like a, whatever laserjet printer or a inkjet printer at card size, and then adhering them to the outside of these little glassine envelopes I found that are like basically exactly the size to hold, call it like 4 to 6 sleeved Magic cards. And you would then have, a picture of Goblin Rabblemaster, the card, at real 1-to-1 size, glued to the outside of the envelope. In the envelope goes the tokens made by that card, which I think was a huge level up for complex token organization because it did not require players to go through the mental loop of what tokens do the cards I make create. They could look at the envelopes and just say, I drafted that card, I drafted that card, I drafted that card. That's a much more direct, like easy thing to do than to like think, oh, do I make any goblins? Do I make any constructs? Do I make any soldiers? Do I make any whatever? No, you just say, I drafted these cards, you pick up all the envelopes and you go.
And it's surprisingly easy. Like you have a good recall, at least in my experience, of the cards that you drafted, and just like flipping through the stack. Maybe you couldn't like list out all the cards you've drafted, but if you're looking through the stack, it's very easy to be like,
Precisely.
oh yes, that's one I drafted.
Exactly, yeah. It would be really hard to remember, which is, I think, why it's also like, if you look at a token, you have to think, what are all the cards I drafted? And it's hard to recall all the cards you drafted with no context. But again, if you like are looking through a stack of cards and you could very clearly identify the ones you drafted, it really was a big level up in that regard. I mostly have been very happy with this approach, although there have been a couple logistical problems that I am trying to solve with my new token approach, which I hope this whole episode is basically for me to like, unveil to the world my new approach to complex token management, which maybe people will adopt, that I think is going to be really good.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Here are the problems with the little glassine envelopes. Number one, they were not very durable, which I think is fine if you are like playing with a local play group and everyone like, is careful and you trust everybody. But like I watch people on coverage at events just like, pull a token out of the envelope, get it halfway out, then like yank it and tear the envelope in half. Like I saw it happen multiple times.
No.
Or like it's got a little tiny tear in the envelope and they like jam all the tokens back in and rip the whole envelope, all the way in half while they're doing it. It was not very durable, these little glassine envelopes. And there wasn't an obvious thing to replace them with because you need to put sleeved cards in there. Because again, you have to sleeve the tokens. Otherwise, when you pull the token out, you're like, okay, well, which side of this token do I care about, right? I didn't want to have any ambiguity about which side of the token you cared about. A thing that, fits some sleeve cards that takes up very minimal space and still fits inside your cube box is like a very specific prompt that these envelopes happen to fill, but they were not very durable. I at one point considered like, what if I wrapped them all in like packing tape or like laminated them or something? But that brings up the other issue, which is that it's extremely high effort. It was a bunch of effort to make them in the first place, and then I like put a new card in the cube, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna like print out, like, I don't have a color like laser printer out, but I'm not gonna like make a FedEx order for like one card to then like cut it out and glue it on one new envelope. I'm just gonna put a piece of tape on this envelope for this one, card that I just added, and all the rest are fine. The high effort also becomes a problem if you have to replace things as they get damaged through like regular play. That has been an issue for me. Maybe other people have not had as many problems with this. I think a lot of people kind of address this problem by just cutting the like closing tab off the top of the little glassine envelope, because a lot of people were like accidentally tearing it when opening that up, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't hold the cards in or anything. So if you just remove that, then it acts like kind of like a paper sleeve, and that kind of worked, but the high effort thing was a problem. And then the third problem, which I think is maybe the biggest one, is that here's the normal sort of flow of how you interact with the tokens by this system. You draft your deck, you go get your tokens, and you think, wow, this is actually way easier. It's so much easier for me to get all my tokens. I'm just going to do it. And I think even players that like would previously be disinclined to even bother looking for their tokens, you just like pass around the stack, and the stack gets put in front of them. They're like, oh yeah, I drafted that card, And it's like so easy that like that really does work. You feel great about that. The games start, you play a card that makes a token, you take the card out of the envelope, you put it in play the game ends. You just put the card you took out of the envelope on top of the envelope in a stack with your other envelopes. You go play your next game. Your next game, you make another token from a different card. This goes on throughout the night. At the end of the night, you have most of your tokens out of the envelopes, next to the envelopes in a stack. And I find that very few players are generous enough to take the time to resort the tokens and put them back in their respective envelopes, because that's kind of annoying, especially if like one of the envelopes got torn. It's like, well, now I put it back in the torn envelope. So I found that I was doing a lot of work after drafts to kind of like reorganize things, or more often I wasn't doing it. And then you got the envelope for Ragavan, which is just supposed to have a treasure in it, and then it actually has nothing in it, because the person that drafted Ragavan also drafted Fabled Mirror Breaker in the previous draft, and they put both treasures back in the Fabled Mirror Breaker envelope because they weren't thinking about which one came from which envelope, because why would you? So those are the problems with that system that I've identified.
Yeah, and I think that is a pretty major issue. I remember, I think it was after you came up with this system, a couple people did it at CubeCon, and the first draft, it was like, oh, this is great.
After Jake and I came up with the system, full credit to Jake.
Of course. It was like a great thing for the first draft. Like, I just happened to be in a couple pods where people had done this because you had spread the idea to some other cube heads. And then the second draft, it was like, oh, nobody put the cards back into the sleeves. Right. And so there is now actually, not only are the cards
tokens are there unsorted, and there's also some garbage.
Also a bunch of other stuff that's just making this more difficult. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's worth stating.
So, here is my new solution, which I'm in the midst of executing for the Bun Magic Cube, which I will admit is really no less high effort up front, though a different kind of effort. It's not going to require a bunch of like arts and crafts of like cutting things out and gluing stuff together.
But we love arts and crafts.
Right, we do love arts and crafts, but, you know, mandatory arts and crafts is never the most fun. Here's my new solution. I have placed an NPC order, make playing cards order, for tokens that have official Magic token art on one side, and on the other side, I have printed the face of the card that makes that token in the exact printing that is in my cube. So every token now is a monk with prowess on one side and a monastery mentor on the back, and I've got 6 of those or whatever. And I've got a bunch of goblin tokens, and on the back of the goblin tokens are Goblin Rabblemaster, or does anything else make goblins in the Bun Magic Cube? I actually don't know now that I say it. Let's see.
You got Den of the Bugbear,
Den
Goblin
of the Bugbear,
Rabblemaster,
Seer Slicer Goblin.
Seer Slicer.
So now there are perhaps more goblins than I would need because I want to have enough for all 3 of those cards to have their own sort of set of goblins, so that there's never any ambiguity about which, goblin these things belong to. The other thing that's important about this, so obviously, this is solving the problem of like, I have a treasure token, I don't know which of these 2 envelopes that creates a treasure token this one goes into. This is solving that problem because now it's clearly printed on the back what that card is for. It also means you don't necessarily even have to sort them anymore and put them in a group. I still want to, but you could just, pass around the tokens upside down, and it's the same experience, right? Take all the cards that have a card that's in your deck, right? Just take them all and put them in your deck, put them in your sideboard. What I want to do then is group them not with a plasticine envelope, but with a penny sleeve. The sort of cheaper clear sleeves that are larger than a card. You can fit like 10 or 20 unsleeved cards in them if you like really squeeze them in there. But I'm going to put probably just like 6 at most or 8 at most in these little sleeves for any card that makes either multiples of the same token or, different types of tokens. Now, for Thraben Inspector, I'm not going to put the Thraben Inspector clue in its own penny sleeve. Who cares? That'll just be like, free roaming in the box. But, for all of the zombies made by Field of the Dead and the actual penny sleeves, obviously not actually marked in any way. It's not like this is the penny sleeve for Field of the Dead. You just put all the Field of the Dead tokens in there, and then naturally on the front of that thing, you will see the token, and on the back, you will see the Field of the Dead. The one thing I can flag immediately is that if people put the tokens in and don't pay attention to which way they're facing, it's possible they could put both of the fronts facing outward. You know what I mean? So like,
yes, yeah.
So you look at the sleeve that contains the Field of the Dead tokens, and it's just a zombie on both sides because they faced the Field of the Dead sides on the inside. That's a potential problem. Realistically, I think people are more likely to just not put them back in the penny sleeves, which is not the end of the world because that I think would be way faster for me to do at the end of a draft night than it was to put them back in the plasticine envelopes, because I also had that problem where I would have a treasure token and I'd be like, which treasure envelope doesn't have a treasure token? I don't know which one. So I have to look at them all now to figure out which one is missing its treasure token. Whereas here, I would just grouping cards with the same back and putting them in a penny sleeve.
I wonder if you might find that the penny sleeve is just really not necessary and it's easy enough just to take the token stack and sort through and pull anything out.
It's possible. I feel like it'll be especially nice for things like Retrofitter Foundry, which makes 3 different types of tokens, where it's like, it matters for Retrofitter Foundry that you get all of them, right? Like, if I imagine what a lot of people might do is like, go through and say, like, here's my Field of the Dead token. I got a couple, and I got a couple of the tokens for Monastery Mentor as well. So I know I have the tokens for all my cards. That doesn't work when the backside is not fungible. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like if I have 6 zombies and I have 2 constructs, 2 thopters, 2 servos in the Retrofitter Foundry stack, there's 6 of each token. If you're looking at the back, all you need is a couple of the ones from the Field of Dead box. And if you're willing to, indicate with dice or something multiples, you don't need to have all 6 of those tokens to have your tokens for Field of the Dead. But you would need to have all 6 of the tokens, or at least, 3 specific of the 6 of the tokens for Retrofitter Foundry to represent that game state sufficiently. It's true. Maybe I'll find the penny sleeves are not necessary. And if so, no harm, no foul. Obviously, a very minimal investment because the sleeves are penny sleeves. They're very cheap. That is how I'm going to handle things for Bun Magic Cube. It will mean placing a new NPC order whenever I get any new cards that make tokens in the cube, which is certainly annoying. And we'll see how willing I am to keep up with that. I've actually separately been thinking, and this is not really pertinent to this conversation at all, but that's a cube that I don't update very often. And I've actually been thinking about maybe just doing it explicitly on a schedule. Maybe update Bun Magic Cube like literally twice a year. And like that means that I'm only twice a year going to be buying a couple more, proxies from NPC order for the tokens or whatever.
So potentially keeping track of changes you're interested in, but then actually
just
like
doing it in one fell
making
swoop.
the changes in paper once a year.
And not really like trying to keep up onesie twosie with stuff, which is maybe a healthy attitude for that. But that's how I'm going to handle it, I think, for Bun Magic Cube. And I have very high hopes for this solution because, again, I think the little envelopes solved so many problems. And there were a couple other ones that they introduced or, surfaced, mainly the like cleanup and survivability, the durability. Thank you. That's the better word. Durability.
You're welcome.
I don't know why I said thank you. You didn't help me at all. You just stared at me while I tried to think of the word. Mainly the durability and cleanup issues were the things that kept coming up. And this, I think, will not have most of those problems. But also, like, it's a ton of work. And something I want to advocate for if you're listening to this is like, again, the most frequent question we get from listeners is like, how do I grow my play group? People don't want to play my cube. They just want to play Commander. Like, how do I get people to like be interested in this format with me? That is what everybody wants. And these are the little things that like you as the cube designer can do that it's a lot of work for you. It's a ton of work to do any of these more complex token solutions. Even just getting and keeping up to date with the tokens your cube creates is a ton of work, but it's work that you can do. And I know you're really invested in cube because you are 56 minutes into an episode just about tokens of the cube podcast. So you're a bona fide sicko. Take some of that sicko energy and do this for your cube because it will make everyone's experience that much nicer. And this is also one of the things that like goes a really long way to showing very transparently how thoughtful you are, right? Like if I'm sitting down to a cube draft and I see that somebody has done this, I'm like, oh, this cube is someone's baby. Like somebody has really, like I immediately know there's also been a ton of thought put into the cards that are included in the cube as well. You didn't throw this together and then also throw together a like custom token solution, right? So it's a way that you can communicate to your drafters that this is something you take seriously and have put a lot of thought and care into. And it also just makes everyone's experience that much better. So it is a lot of work, but I want to like advocate for more people doing it, I think, than are currently doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a really great solution, and I think it'll just make things a lot easier. I do want to acknowledge it's not only a lot of work in terms of just like keeping up with it, like placing print orders. You also have like specific technical skills that you can take images and like put them together into a print sheet and like understand bleeds and stuff. So I don't know, are there any resources that you're aware of that would make that process, just like the technical aspect, easier for folks?
Yeah, NPC Fill does do tokens as well. So
it does. Okay.
So you can, I think it's NPC Autofill or Fill, whatever. It's a site that helps you generate, the JSON or XML file for a order on makeplayingcards.com. They do tokens. That site has a combination of fan-made art and, Wizards license stuff that everyone's kind of wink looking the other way at. You sometimes can get the official token you want, and I was very picky about like, okay, this is Thraben Inspector from Shadows over Innistrad. I want a Shadows over Innistrad clue art, and I also want one that like almost looks like it could be the clue that Thraben Inspector is holding, right? Like I was very specific about that. I even went the extra effort of for Skyclave Apparition, which when it dies, the thing it's exiling, your opponent gets a blue spirit or blue illusion rather, that has power equal to the mana value of the lost thing. And the fact that it only targets mana value 4 or less means that you just need a 4/4, a 3/3, a 2/2, and a 1/1 spirit. And so
That's kinda cool.
I made all of those. Instead of having one that's a star, we have to remember which one it is. Because I'm like, well, there's only 4 of them, so I'll just make all of them. You can use whichever one you need at the time. I am going above and beyond in some ways that if you don't, have a image editing software or the skill or will to like learn how to do that, it might be a barrier. But NPC Fill, I think, definitely will do what you want.
And this is definitely the copy token you're using for sure?
That is not the copy token I am using under any circumstances. We're kind of out of time here. Real quick, just to like complete the story here, I want to talk about what the tokens are like in my other cubes, because I have found that what I really want in each cube is like a token solution that is tailored to that environment. I've alluded to Neoclassical already. There's just fewer cards that make tokens back then. I didn't have to think about it that hard. And there's not that many tokens such that there's a stack of them and you can just look through them all. You don't have to divide by color, because I don't think there's a single blue token in the entire cube. There might not even be there's a black token from the Phyrexian thing that makes the big horror, but there's not any zombie tokens in that cube, I'm almost certain. So anyway, there's just like way fewer tokens. You can just look through and get what you want. My one complaint there is that a lot of the old tokens are actually just catastrophically expensive. The period correct Sapperling token is, I think, $17 or $18 a piece. Maybe I'm getting these ones flipped. And the period correct insect token made by Symbiotic Worm, I think is like $30 a pop or something insane. Maybe it's vice versa. Maybe the Sapperling's like $30 a pop. So that really sucks. I have not invested in those correct tokens, and I wish they were cheaper. But other than that, no real complaints about that. I will say, older cards, you will get cards that make tokens that just never were printed. They don't exist at all. There's, I think, 1 or 2 in that cube, and I know there's one in Take 5 because there is no Arami token of the Tomb of Arami. But that's how that cube is handled. Take 5 is actually really interesting in that it's a really mechanically complicated cube, intentionally. I set out from the beginning to like embrace a lot of mechanical complexity, embrace, cards interacting with each other in funky ways, embrace a lot of rules text, embrace things that like do weird stuff. And even with my goal to embrace that, I got to the end of like the first version when I first got to 360 cards in that cube, and I only had like 6 different tokens. And I was like, clearly there's some bias in my head where like I'm trying to like favor something. I mean, I like cards with downsides there. I try to avoid things that are generically powerful, and I think a lot of things that make extra game pieces tend to be generically powerful. But I just ended up with very few tokens, and I just kind of leaned into that. And there were a couple of cards that made specific tokens. I was like, all right, fine, I can just cut that. And the thing that happens in that cube quite a bit, which I think is an interesting distinction to make, is that there's a distinction between a generic token that a couple of cards make. That is like one type of way a token can exist. That cube has a lot of things where it's like a hyper-specific token. Like there's Orami that Tomb of Orami makes, and there's the 8/8 Vigilant whatever construct or beast or golem that Grover the Guardian makes. And there's the like golem tokens that Precursor Golem makes. That one's a more generic one, and it happens to be in this cube. There's no other golem tokens. So in that cube, it's like there's never a token deck. There's not a lot of cards that make tokens. There's actually probably the fewest individual cards that make tokens of any of my cubes in that particular cube. And a lot of times it's just like, okay, I need this one token for this one card, and it's like very clear that there's nobody else that's ever going to take that token from you. It's like a very specific thing just for you, which makes it a little easier. And I've been happy with that, just also having very few tokens. In a cube that is already very complicated, I've been happy to sort of just whittle down. And, the Goblin Trenches token, the like red and white Goblin token that Goblin Trenches make is like, all right, I mean, your deck is probably built around Goblin Trenches. It's reasonable to ask you to go get the Goblin Trenches token out of the token box or whatever. Last but not least, 100 Ornithopters maybe has my favorite token box of any of my cubes, because what the token box for Ornithopters contains, first of all, obviously there's no creature tokens in that cube, so naturally a lot of the tokens are just ruled out completely. You're not going to have very many because all the creatures are copies of the card Ornithopter. That token box has a Duretti emblem, a Vraska emblem, a couple Monarch tokens, because there's a couple cards that make the Monarch. It's got a treasure and a gold, which I don't love, because I do have Curse of Opulence, which makes gold tokens instead of treasure tokens, and Deadly Dispute, which makes treasure tokens. There's a map token for Fanatical Offering, and then there are 16 copies of Bloodforged Battle Axe and 16 copies of Tempest Technique.
And these are not tokens, these are just actual cards.
They're not tokens, they're just cards. Neither of them are expensive cards, so getting a bunch of copies of it was no problem. And that is like so on theme for what that cube is about, that the token box breaks singleton for a bunch of very specific tokens that like part of the game mechanically is making a bunch of game pieces about, is very cool. So I actively love that I have a couple of what might be otherwise considered like fiddly annoying cards, right? Like to have a Tempest Technique or a Bloodforged Battle Axe that make copies of themselves could be really annoying, and I just made it fun in that cube by including a bunch of copies in the token box, and it never ceases to get a big smile out of people when I hand them the big stack of tokens, which happened just last night when we were playing this cube. Is there's a new player that was like playing Tempest Technique, and I was like, did you get the Tempest Technique out of the token box? They're like, what do you mean? And I handed them 16. They were like, oh, this is great. So
it is a very good bit.
In that particular cube, I sleeve all of the Tempest Techniques in white, all the Bloodforged Battle Axes in silver, and the other tokens in black. And so it's very easy to find what you're looking for, even though there's like 40 tokens, because most of them are either Bloodforged Battle Axe or Tempest Technique. Anyway, this is my big treatise on like thinking about the tokens in your cube and either making them a part of your design, a la Sacred Geometry, a la 100 Ornithopters, where like they reflect the spirit of the environment and they are like a considered cohesive part of the entire draft experience. Or if your design goals do not comport with that, like Bun Magic, really going above and beyond to like think through the logistics and try and make it as easy on your players as possible to acquire the tokens for the cards that their deck makes, use them in game properly, and then return them to you in a reasonable way such that it is easy to set up for the next draft. Just like rapid fire, I want to acknowledge a couple other token solutions I've seen that I myself have avoided because people might mention them in the comments. I've drafted cubes before where the cards that make tokens have the tokens in the sleeve of the actual card that you draft, which is interesting. It's brilliant in that everyone inherently has all their tokens automatically as soon as they start the game. I found it to be annoying because I had to then take all the tokens out of the sleeves before I shuffled up, obviously, because the cards that made tokens were extra thick in the deck. You can't just shuffle them up like that unless your cube is very, very casual. And then in some cards, I think I've drafted a cube like this where Retrofitter Foundry was one of the cards. And so the Retrofitter Foundry had 3 tokens jammed in the sleeve, which made the sleeve like distended and kind of like, big and stretched out, which meant that it still felt weird and different when I was playing with it, even after I'd taken the tokens out. And then because you're in a sleeve, you can't sleeve the tokens. I remember it doing this before with other deck cubes and having the problem of them having used Voices of the Coast printed tokens and then me not knowing where this goes back, because again, maybe I have multiple cards that make a treasure, or maybe this has a treasure and a goblin on the back, and I have a card that makes treasure and a card that makes goblins. Which one does this go into? It's like a whole annoying thing. So I have not gone down that route for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like the perfect solution, but in my experience, it was a lot of damaged sleeves and potentially damaged cards as well if you don't have the ability to double sleeve them because you're trying to fit so much in one sleeve.
We talked about affinity tokens. We talked about drawing your own tokens on paper blanks.
How do you feel about if I have like an embalm creature? I just grab it out of the graveyard and pull it out of the sleeve a bit to indicate something's changed.
That I actually don't hate as much as maybe you would think.
I was doing a lot of that last night.
I like that embalming something requires exiling it, so like you're not actually removing a thing from your graveyard. Like I would never want you to do that to indicate something where that card is mechanically still in your graveyard.
What about Feldman of the Third Path? I'm just grabbing that card.
Yeah, at least that literally goes away at the end of the turn.
Right.
But like, in Take 5, there's a lot of ways you can specifically keep that token by either populating it or ending the turn with the sacrifice trigger on the stack. And like I specifically have a big stack of copy tokens for that cube, because there's a lot of things that copy stuff, and I don't want you to like be doing that there. But for the most part, I think it's fine because, yeah, the Timeless Dragon is no longer in your graveyard. You pulled it out of the sleeve, which indicates something's different about it, and then also indicates that you're like, when you go to put it in the graveyard again, you'll remember, oh, it's out of the sleeve. This is actually in exile. Like, it helps remind you of that. That is really not the worst for me, actually. I don't mind that so much. What's your favorite token, Anthony? And why is it Sapperlings?
Because they're just wonderful little guys. Although, to be honest, I don't love as many of the illustrations in the Sapperling tokens as I wished.
The old one's really good.
The old one is, and also more hamburgers than you even cited.
It's more than 34 hamburgers?
It's at least 50 hamburgers.
Oh my god.
One other question about to go back to your new token solution, is there any concern about these cards looking like printings of real cards that might be an issue if, say, Wizards of the Coast employees wanted to play your cubes?
I may or may not have discussed this possibility with one or more Wizards of the Coast employees, and they may or may not have indicated that
it may or may not be an issue.
That they can't imagine it would ever be a problem.
Okay.
May or may not.
Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's no, like, the card is not attempting to be a, like, counterfeit because the back has a monk printed on it or whatever, so that would be obvious. I did think about doing some kind of treatment to the card, honestly, just to verify when you're looking at it, like, oh, that's not a copy of Monastery Mentor, and I was like, I could make it desaturated, but then you can't tell the color difference, which just seems pretty important. You could, like, put some kind of icon or typography over the rules text that just, like, indicated this was, like, a token placeholder. Honestly, like, if that's the kind of rule that Wizards of the Coast would, like, be mad... If Wizards of the Coast, if you're mad at me for doing this, Wizards of the Coast, frankly... Okay, I have these whole giant cubes with all these original cards. I'm a big investor in the game, and you print stupid ass tokens I can't sort and organize in any reasonable way because it only makes sense for retail limited. And if you're going to get mad at me for making my own token solution to make this easier for my players, then frankly just get
Fair enough.
And on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. You can support the production of this show by going to patreon.com/luckypaper. It's got to be it. Or checking the show notes.
Just go to the show notes and click on the link. It's easier.
Yep, and you can support us and the work we do for the Cube Fellowship and everything else we do over here at Lucky Paper. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by thinking really hard about Magic cards and the tokens they produce. And speaking to microphones about it, Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you for talking to me just about tokens for a whole hour. Incredible.
I just felt kind of rushed. I think we could have gone longer.
I mean, I feel like just one little thing to throw in here that's not about tokens, but as a player, tokens are not always provided for every cube that I play, so I do like having a pretty hefty bag of dice and having different types of dice to be able to represent, here's my face down card for my sideboard, I'm going to put a big numeral 2 in the corner, so this is a 2-2, and I'm going to keep it next to the thing that makes the 2-2s, just to be clear, but then also have, like you mentioned, the +1/+1 counter, so I can have a distinction between that, so that's one of the fun things about playing games to me, is just collecting dice and making sure you have a set that's going to allow you to represent lots of board states.
We could do a whole episode maybe about our
Dice?
respective dice boxes, your dice bag and my dice bear, and go through the contents.
Next week.
Go through the contents. I mean, I have a really, like...
Here's my everyday carry. What's your stack?
I would genuinely be so sad if I lost my dice bear. It is like, it's got so many specific and like sentimental things in it now, and it's like...
I lost 2 of my favorite dice at some point, and I was so sad.
Yeah.
And then someone found them weeks later.
So long. So many weeks later.
After I had like carefully researched and found where to get these like no longer out of production dice on the internet.
Have you been to the weirdo ChessX dice category? There's
of
like,
course.
it's such a good page on their website.